Welcome, everyone. It's a delight to have you here today for another fabulous episode with Emma Cox of Journeys into Genealogy, who is here for us each month for this wonderful series where she talks about her own family research, how she gets there, and delightfully shares the resources. So today, allow me to introduce, as part of Emma Explores, Emma Cox. You want to go ahead, Emma?
Thank you very much. I will share my screen with you in just one moment. Screen. Okay, can you see that okay? Excellent. So today we're going to be talking about one of my relatives. Her name is Florence de Fonblanque, and a march that she organised between Edinburgh and London in 1912. So this is quite appropriate for International Women's Day and International Women's Month, it feels like marches this year. So a little bit of background for anybody who doesn't know me. My name's Emma Cox. I'm a family historian and genealogist. I'm based in Kent in England, in the UK. I help people find out about their ancestors, put together family trees, love investigating DNA and finding living people, and also helping people if they're interested in writing books and other things about their family history. As Barbara mentioned, I've also got a podcast called Journeys into Genealogy, where there are over 100 interviews now with people who've got interesting stories and experts in different areas. So Florence de Fonblanque, Edinburgh to London for women's suffrage. This is 113 years ago now, 1912 this took place. And you can see we've got Edinburgh on and shown in the middle of the screen there. I'm not 100% sure whether this image is actually from it or from another march that went on afterwards. But this gives you a little bit of an idea about what it would have been like for people who actually took part in a march. So Florence herself, she was born in 1864, and she was born to a Swiss confectioner. Her surname is not particularly easy to pronounce, Sparagnapane. So Florence Gertrude Sparagnapane. And she was actually born in England, and her father was apparently one of the first people to invent Christmas crackers, I think it was. So he did some interesting things. So she came from an interesting family. And she was also an actress, and she had a pen name, if you want to call it, an AKA of Florence Kingsley. And she married fellow actor Robert de Fonblanque. He was also known as Robert Kingsley. So I found him under both names when I was looking for him, and also found them in things like newspaper articles. So again, the British Newspaper Archive is a great place to look if you're looking for information on some of your ancestors. And they settled into a little village. It's a tiny place called Duncton in Sussex, which is on the south coast of England. So Florence had three sisters. So she was, I think, the second eldest, and her sister Maud was also a very well-known suffragette. She was actually even more well-known than Florence herself. At the ripe old age of 43, Florence decided that she wanted to actually do something to help women's rights back in 1912, well before people could actually vote. And she wanted to take a petition to the Prime Minister to actually support women's rights. And she came up with the idea about doing a march. So setting off in Edinburgh and going all the way to London. So she's my 2 times great aunt. She was married to my great grandfather's half brother. And this is the story of her and her march. And you can see her picture on the right-hand side, looking very smart and dressed up as she would have been dressed to actually do the march, because they even had uniforms when they did it. So to get things going, Florence actually posted letters in the newspapers asking people to join her. So she hoped to get about 100 people, including people on horseback, and actually go from Edinburgh to London. And to do this, you didn't actually have to take part in the whole thing. You could actually do a small piece locally to you. You could go the whole way if you wanted to. It's completely up to you what you wanted to do. However, it was expected that you would be self-supporting. So a bit like somebody who did some marathon running or something like that, or you're doing money for charity, that you would actually manage to actually do some sort of donations to cover your own costs. So in here it says, will you allow me to call your readers' attention to a new scheme to advance the cause of women's suffrage? A great march of about 100 suffragists, led by horsewomen, is being organised to start early in October. The objective is to carry the flag of women's suffrage from London to Edinburgh to protest against any further extension of the parliamentary franchise to men unless women are included. And you can see this is actually on September the 9th in 1912, and she's planning on doing this march in October. So she's not giving very much notice before it actually takes place. And these are some of the official documents that were created, sort of leaflets that were given out to people to actually encourage people to take part. And I contacted the Women's Library collection at the London School of Economics Library, and they very kindly allowed me to actually use some of these images. They're from their own collections there. And it wasn't a march in terms of that's all they did, because they actually stopped. Obviously, they took it in stages, and they held meetings wherever they stopped as well. And they talked about women's suffrage and wanted to get people to actually then support them, some to take part in the march, and some to actually just to support them and actually sign the petition. So the route is suggested that it's split into various different days on the right-hand side here, and recruits can join at any point, and they're expected to defray their own expenses, which are estimated at 13 shillings a week, and that they would have their own uniform. So the uniform can be got from Messrs Debenham and Freebody in Wigmore Street. Now, the company Debenhams actually still existed up until probably 10, 15 years ago, and that was one of the department stores in London, so that kept going for an awfully long time there. So you can see that she is the honorary secretary, and there's a lady called Margaret Byam, who is the honorary treasurer and route secretary, and they were two of the people who actually did the whole thing. So you can see here, they in certain places, like, for example, Musselburgh, which is just south of Edinburgh, they stayed for a couple of nights, as they did in Morpeth and Easingwold, and as they went through. So it took them, I think, about a month or so to actually do the whole march. And this is actually a picture of them, 5 of the ladies who took part. So Florence is the lady in the middle, who looks quite stern with a bag showing in front of her there. And then you can see there's the cart behind. It's actually got the petition mentioned on the side of it, and it's being drawn by a horse, and the horse's name is Butterfly, and that is actually her horse doing it. And so these ladies, the 6 of them, there's another lady hiding on the left-hand side there, sorry, they were the ones that did the entire route all the way from Edinburgh down to London. And you can see that the clothes that they wore and the shoes that they were just ordinary clothes. It must have been a lot of effort to do it. Can you imagine that? It's several hundred miles walking in shoes like that. It's not like we have cushioned soled shoes like we do now. And I think it's amazing that they actually did it. So the first stage, it started on the 12th of October. And went from Edinburgh to Musselburgh, which isn't too far south. And so the 6 of them started off, and more joined as they carried on. So it says on the right-hand side in the newspaper clipping, they went, about 300 of them did the first 6 miles, and then they stopped there, and then they had a meeting and stayed overnight and rallied themselves, and then carried on afterwards. And this is the picture that I had on the front cover, which I think is an amazing display. And you can see in this, there are lots and lots of different groups taking part. And I'm actually fairly sure that, since I've done some more research with this, that this is actually another march that took place afterwards, that Florence was the one who actually paved the way, as it were, for other marches, because you've got various different groups taking part in this one. You can see from the different banners that they're actually holding there. And the women were all dressed in their ordinary clothes there, and you can see there are men alongside them. There are men taking part as well. I mean, it wasn't just women marching the entire time. Men did support them, and men signed their petition as well. And these are some other pictures of them on their route. I rather like the one on the right-hand side. So they've got as far as Selby, which is in North Yorkshire. They've done 217 miles by this point, and they're still standing, obviously looking a little severe. I don't think anyone was particularly used to having their photographs taken in those days there, but it actually does name the ladies who took part in this. So Florence, again, she's the lady sitting in the middle, And we've got Mrs. White, Mrs. Stevenson, Mrs. Richardson, Miss Beck, Miss Bennett, Miss Byam, and Miss Brown. So they've gone from Edinburgh all the way to Selby, and now they've got another 179 miles to go. And I rather like the description that's given here. Dressed in brown with rosettes and bright green cockades, they were known as the Brown Women. They followed the route of the A1, which is the main north-south route in England, and they were joined by dignitaries along the way. One day near Berwick, they walked over 30 miles before the now 7 marchers were welcomed by the local Member of Parliament. Their numbers swelled slowly. When they passed through Grantham in November, there were 12 walkers, averaging 15 miles a day and up to 30 miles a day. Can you imagine walking 30 miles a day dressed like that? That's quite an achievement. And there's a lovely little press cutting here that I just wanted to show for you. She was basically very determined to get her signatures. So she asked a man working at the top of a telegraph pole, and he refused. And she actually climbed up the pole to present him with the petition, which he signed. So it's like that. I just think that's brilliant. And so, as it said, many who could not walk the whole distance joined them for part of the way. And it was a very peaceful demonstration. So there was no violence or anything like that. It was just that they wanted to make their feelings known, and they wanted other people to support them as well. And then once they got to London, there was an official reception. So they arrived in Camden Town, which is North London, and they were to be going from there and meeting up with lots and lots of the local societies, the other societies. So these are all mentioned, and they're formed up, and they're given a particular order to be formed up. And we've also got men's leagues mentioned there. So you've got things like the Actresses Franchise League, which are both Florence and Maud, her sister, were members of. You've got the Women's Writers, the Cymric Suffrage Union, Catholics, Irish Women, Hampstead Garden Suburb, Women's Sympathisers. But then after that, you've got the Men's League for Women's Suffrage, the Men's Political Union, the Men's Federation for Women's Suffrage, and the Men's Committee for Justice to Women. So a lot of people actually did support this. And the idea was that they would walk from Camden Town through North London, and they would meet up in Trafalgar Square. And that's not too far from Downing Street, which is where the Prime Minister's residence is. And on the right-hand side, it also talks about the progress that they were making along the route, and the fact that when they got to Selby, they talked about a good crowd listened very attentively to our speakers, and afterwards readily signed our petition and bought literature. And that's one of the things about it. They sometimes, when people actually wanted to support them, they wouldn't just sign. They actually went and listened to what they had to say and then signed their petition. And here's the official programme for the entry into London on Saturday, November the 16th. So you can see they're all in their uniform, brown dresses and hats with green cockades, and they're supposed to leave Barnet at 9 o'clock and arrive at Highgate Station by 12 and have lunch there, and then arrive at Trafalgar Square about 2:30. And it talks about the different route that they will actually take, and they're basically going past pretty much they are all tube stations now, those areas that are mentioned on there. Highgate, Archway, Kentish Town, Camden Town, Hampstead, Tottenham Court Road, Trafalgar Square are all tube stations. And it's, again, this is how it was all set out. And there was a list of speakers who will actually take part in it. So you can see there are various things here. There are lots of male speakers as well as female speakers. And then there's a resolution. This meeting prays that the government will bring in a bill giving votes to women this session. Come in your thousands to support the petition and the great peaceful protest of the Edinburgh marchers against the passing of any reform bill that does not include women. Now, unfortunately, the Prime Minister didn't actually take a great deal of notice of it. Little sympathy or comprehension was what was stated in some of these newspaper articles here. And he received it, but he didn't really do anything with it. There's lots of different newspaper articles just showing there. I like the one on the right-hand side, Northern Gossip. Mrs. de Fonblanque was chieftainess of the suffragette marchers, and the different ways that people are actually described in there. So there was an interesting article which did a sort of a summary of what happened as a result of this. So the army was little, only 6 women set off, a few did other join the march en route, and then it swelled and then decreased as it went on. So as they went, they had people who came to meetings and did short sections of the march with them. It appears that the character of this march was distinctly more religious and spiritual than political, and that the suppression of sweated labour and of the white slave trade were of concern, as well as the enfranchisement of women. The marchers reached London on the 16th of November, having held as many as 3 meetings a day along the route. So they might have stopped at various different places, not just one place. Maud Arncliffe's Senate coordinated the arrival into London, the women being accompanied at this stage by such male suffragists as Cecil Chapman and Israel Zangwill. A large meeting was held in Trafalgar Square, at which Charlotte Despard was one of the speakers, and a petition praying the government to bring in a bill for women's suffrage this session and containing thousands of signatures garnered during the course of the march was presented by Florence de Fonblanque to a representative of the Prime Minister. Although the march achieved no political success, it provided an outlet for active women who could not condone militancy. However, although the main constitutional society, the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, had refused to take part in the Women's March, it obviously recognised the value of the idea and shamelessly adopted it, organising its own pilgrimage the next year. And after the march, it led to several others in England and the USA. And Florence went on to found something called Qui Vive Corps, which campaigned for the women's right to vote. And one of its objectives was to show that the women of England are as capable of organisation, comradeship and discipline as the men. I think that's a lovely phrase. And Florence, her sister, Maud, who organised a reception in London, went on to actively support the suffragist movement for the next few years. Now, these are medals. This is Florence's medal, and you can see on it, it says Edinburgh to London for women's suffrage, 400 miles, November the 16th, 1912. Florence de Fonblanque, originator and leader of the Women's March. So this is Florence's one. And we've also got another one. This is Butterflies. So the horse got his own medal, his or her own medal, not sure of the whether it was a male or female, but yeah, and my cousin's got these. So these are out in France at the moment. So 400 miles that the horse did, and they all did. And after the march, Florence actually publicly thanked her sister and various other people who had helped them and supported them. And she did a couple of other things that I just wanted to share with you because they're slightly unusual. She put together a patent, nothing to do with the march, but a patent for a glove, something to do with putting a pocket in a glove. And I found this when I was looking for information on her online, and I just thought it's a bit unusual, the fact that she had a patent and also for a glove. And then when it came to her will, so £1 of mushrooms and £10 has been left to Michael G. Mant of Petworth in Sussex in her will. She bequeathed a book of newspaper cuttings relating to the march and the inkstand made out of the hoof of my mare Butterfly, which drew the petition cart to the Women's Freedom League. Michael Mant is the 11-year-old son of Mr. Mant, solicitor of Petworth. The bequest of mushrooms arises from the time when Mrs. de Fonblanque entertained my son to tea. He was then 5 or 6 years old. She asked what he would like, and he replied that he would rather have had mushrooms. She never forgot it. She had a keen sense of humour. And then this is her memorial when she died in January 1949. And she was 83. And my grandmother actually used to go and visit her. I know that she used to go and do that. And it's not too far from where I grew up in Sussex. And it says here she was related on her mother's side to the Earls of Devon. I haven't worked out how that happens yet. Her father was an Italian. Actually, he was Swiss, but Swiss Italian. I think it was on the borders. Friend of Garibaldi, Mazzini, and Cavour. He travelled all over Europe, and her youth was spent in an atmosphere of politics. All her life, she'd been an active worker for anti-vivisection, and when she was over 70, she was given a medal for saving her bull terrier when her houseboat, an old submarine chaser in the 1914 war, was wrecked. And I found the newspaper article about that, and she basically had to wade out to actually go and get the dog and to come back and everything like that. So she was definitely quite a character. And there's various people mentioned in here, my grandmother being her niece, and my grandmother's sisters, and other people there. And this is her gravestone in Duncton. So this still exists there. And actually, the people of Duncton are very proud of her. And she's mentioned in the local society and things. And so Robert de Grenier de Fonblanque, Marquis de Julien, Comte d'Auxerre, Comte de Fonblanque. He never really did anything with those titles. They were sort of not quite honorary, but sort of not quite 100%. But they were both buried there in Duncton in Sussex. So I just wanted to go through some of the different sources that I've used for this, because they're different to ones I've used previously. Wikipedia again, and the Women's Library Collection. If you have any interest in suffrage, the Women's Library Collection at the LSE is a brilliant resource to actually have a look at. And there's also a book which may not necessarily be easy to get hold of, because I couldn't find a printed copy anywhere. There were references to it, The Women's Suffrage Movement, a Reference Guide by Elizabeth Crawford. And also a map there. If we just go to that one, have a quick look. So this is Florence's mention on here, but this talks about lots of other people, suffrage map and biography. So you can see where different things took place. So that can be quite a useful report, and you can see it's split by the different societies on there. Google Arts and Culture. So this links through to a presentation that was put together, which talks about suffrage and mentions Florence and various other people and the various different marches that happened. So this is the one for Florence here. So it's worthwhile taking another look at that. There's also something called suffrage resources. So this is actually encouraged for school children so that they can learn more about it, but it's a very good and simple website which gives a lot of information here. The Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, that is actually a subscription website. We can get access to it via a library. I don't know if people in other countries can possibly do the same thing using their library card. Again, the British Newspaper Archive. Patent Office, if you want to try and look for old patents. So that's it. Any questions?
That was fascinating, Emma. Thank you so much. As I posted in on Substack, this got me so inspired on last week that I wrote my own post about my family and starting to explore it. My first aha moment was my idiocy in not realizing that, of course, I would not find my grandmother, my great grandmother, under her own name. She would be under her husband's name in the newspapers. So it just seemed so ironic to have, this whole campaign for suffrage be run under one's husband's name. But that just goes to show where things were at the time. I wondered if in the UK you had the same thing we had here, which was the notion of a women's pages. So the newspaper would come out and there were pages, the society pages, which really were the women's pages. You can tell by the ads, for makeup and things like that. And this is where the stories about meetings and the socially appropriate causes that the women were carrying, things like the abolition of smoking, which was surprised me because my mother was a smoker. Must have deeply offended her grandmother. I had no idea. And do you have the same kind? Did you have the same kind of thing?
Well, if I look into a different part of my family history, there was a gentleman by the name of Edward William Cox, and he used to publish something called Queen magazine. And so that was basically for women. So that was published in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it morphed into something called Harper's and Queen, which still exists today. And I've actually got, I think I've got their 50th anniversary edition in one of a chests somewhere. But all of the adverts in there are obviously aimed at women. There were different publications that would be aimed at women, I think. People definitely in different newspapers and things, there were women's pages and things like that, and you have puzzles for children sometimes, and so they definitely did actually have different sections like that.
I was also interested in the medals and sashes. I've been exploring a Daughters of the American Revolution, my only taste to these kinds of society things, and they seem fascinated by medals, which seems to be a business model. I mean, they make money from the selling of medals, and people are encouraged, incented to get medals for their ancestors. And then they wear them on sashes at events, which, yeah, seems very 19th century to me.
I think that those medals they're obviously they don't mean anything in terms of person hasn't done anything to actually earn those medals. They're purely to look good, really. So
Well, in this case, they seem to be a gift of thanks, no? By the group, they were individual to your ancestor, your great grand aunt, and the horse. You know, they were commemorative in that sense. Would they have
these
been done
ones,
by the group? Yeah,
they must have been, yes. And I would
yeah.
imagine that the other 5 or 6 women who did the entire march would have done the same thing. They would all had medals as well. Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't just her.
And all shall have prizes. Cynthia, I think you had something to add.
You're on mute.
There we
Yeah.
go. I know I was trying, could not hit it. The DAR, I'm in the DAR, and I know they have there's a huge array of different kinds of medals. And one that pretty much everyone has is when you become a member, you have one that has your ancestor's name on it to show that this is the person from whom you're descended, that you were able to join. But they have medals, and the member has to purchase them, and they are not cheap. They're very
No,
expensive, but they have them from
buy mine.
what?
I didn't buy mine.
Oh, yeah. They have all kinds of things. You could have one for an office that you held, or, kinds of stuff. That I just wanted
Tenure.
to know.
But it struck you similarly antediluvian, is that right? Or am I putting words in your mouth?
Me
It
or Emma?
seemed old. Yeah, you
Sure.
Cynthia.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably been going on since it started, because sashes were a very, you know, 19th, early 20th
yeah.
century thing. And yeah, the blue and white sash that the DAR has, your medals go on that. And they have the whole protocol for what you can wear where. And yeah, it's very organized.
We have something in the England called the Masons. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Freemasons,
Oh, yeah.
Freemasons.
Yeah.
So
Global.
yeah. So I sort of think that that's similar in some ways in terms of medals and sort of the ceremonies and things like that.
It's interesting you bring that up because in the talk we had on Tuesday with Elsa Piper in Australia, it was a fascinating conversation about memoir and memories and so on. I highly recommend it. In there, one of the comments she made was talking about ritual and experiences that she had with thinking about ritual, and I found it just a tremendous aha moment in the ways in which formalized rituals, such as are part of church services or something like that. This is largely in the context of funerals and these kinds of memorial services, but they are a way for an organization to pass its DNA down, pass down what it values, and in the form of not a thing, but in a thing that you do. And I suspect that's very much carries over. And in fact, I've been doing a lot of stuff on Lafayette, who was a figure in our American history. He's, of course, French and nothing to do with any of us, but he wanted to get in there and get in on the fight. And then he comes back 40 years later and is feted as a hero for political purposes at the time by the Americans, who were at the time wavering on the country relative to our Civil War. But he was a Mason, and the whole Masonic traditions, which I guess are kind of secret, and the rituals that are part of that, and the gloves and the badges and the things that happen, it's a big deal. And yeah, the artifacts were an important part of it. And then there were a whole lot of artifacts that were generated for his visit as he went to every single Masonic place in town on his tour.
If you're looking for any of your male ancestors, you can often find the Freemason registers and your ancestors mentioned on them. I found those on Ancestry in different places for different people.
Oh, yes.
And I remember many years ago, my grandfather died. I think it was about 1998, my mother's father. And he was a Mason. Not that we really knew anything about it at the time, but I remember finding his regalia, whatever it was. I think it was a sash and some sort of something or other medalish type thing, and ended up giving them back.
They get little belts that look like the thing on a kilt.
It has like an apron kind of thing, right?
Apron. Yeah, apron's the word.
Yeah. So we sent those back, and I think that there was somebody else on my father's side. I can't remember who it was. It wasn't my grandfather, but someone else there, and I seem to remember seeing some something that they would have worn.
Yeah, I was sort of remembered something about my great-grandfather being a Mason, and then on all the articles I was turning up on Suffrage, there were references to him as a Mason and a Shriner. Wow.
But then the Masons, I can remember when I don't think it was me. When I was doing some research for a client, I even found them in India. So with the meetings taking place in India, so meetings could be anywhere.
One of the many great things that Britain brought around the world. Along with
and actually, we've got they did an open buildings day in the county town of Sussex, in East Sussex, called Lewes, and I was walking past things there, and one of the places that was open was the Freemasons Hall, so I went in and had a look, and actually had a wander around, and a really nice man took me around and explained how it all worked and everything. And there wasn't really the secrecy, because before that I always thought it was a very secret organization and you didn't speak about it and all this sort of thing. But them actually being open for the day and actually taking people around and explaining different things and showing me they got flags on the walls and things, and that was interesting.
There is a Masonic Center near me in Oakland, California. They have a hall where they have, it's basically a hall for events and things like that. I went to the Christmas revels there once, and sort of had the sense that I was sneaking into a secret hall. But yeah, ritual. Maybe that's.
But if you talk about rituals start a lot earlier in this country. If you forget the religious side of things, because we all know about religious and things like that, but we have things like the Cubs and the Brownies, which are then become the Scouts and the Girl Guides.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all of those, and I can remember sort of getting various badges. I can't remember what they were for. I can remember the brown uniform.
Yeah,
didn't go to that many, but
I was a brownie with brown uniform. Yeah, badges.
Yeah.
I wonder, I guess, if those fabric badges were carried over from the metal badges from the 19th century for grown-ups. Interesting.
encouraging you
Wow.
into a way of thinking about sort of working, helping other people, achieving things, being rewarded for it and everything.
Yeah.
Had to do different things to earn the badge, didn't you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then all of you as the community members had all done the same things. You went on the learn how to make a fire and learn how to sail a boat, learn how to go to the old folks home for X period of time and take care of.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And be nice to other people, be respectful of others and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Emma,
I
when
learned all the wrong lessons.
sorry, when did
Go
when
ahead.
did the women in England finally get the right to vote and stuff?
I am not 100% sure. Give me a moment.
After all the marches, I'm just wondering.
Great question. I was wondering that too. I recall looking it up and realizing it was before the Americans did because we didn't get it until 1920. So it wasn't long after. And I didn't.
1918.
Oh, after the war, then probably.
A Representation of the People Act was passed, which allowed women over the age of 30 met a property qualification to vote. And although 8.5 million women met this criteria, it's only about 2/3 of the total population. The same act abolished property and other restrictions for men and extended the vote to virtual men over the age of 21. Additionally, men in the armed forces could vote from the age of 19. The electorate increased from 8 to 21 million. There was still huge inequality between women and men. It was not until the Equal Franchise Act of 1928 that women over 21 were able to vote, and women finally achieved the same voting rights as men. This act increased the number of women eligible to vote to 15 million. That's on our government website, parliament.uk.
Interesting.
So it was interesting that in 1918, when they do give women the right to vote, only those with property and of an age, and meanwhile release that for men, so men still feel superior.
Yeah. But if you think about what women had to do during World War I, if all the men were away, they would have been working in factories, they would have been doing so much more, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Without the ability to vote.
It's not so long ago when you think about it, is it? A century.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So much has changed in the last 120
Oh,
years.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
world is a completely different place.
What, Linda, what
And
is
yet,
the legal age for voting in Canada?
18. Yeah. As far as I know, I think for everything like city and province and country, I think so. Yeah.
just
Is
curious,
it the
what's the
same
age
in
for
the
drinking?
States? Is it the same?
Yeah.
It's 18 in the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
And what about drinking? Is that the same as well in Canada? Is it 18?
Yes. Yeah.
Still 21 here.
Here it's 21, but
Okay.
it was raised from 18 to 21 in many states when I can't remember, in the 70s, I think, when they tried to manage it for limiting the speed of highways, and it was tied to the distribution of federal dollars for interstate highways. Only it required them to raise the age of drinking from 18 to 21. In the state of Hawaii, I grew up where I was 18. We could drink. Come to California and you couldn't drink until after, well, 77. So
It's one of the
somewhere in
things
there,
in,
78.
yeah, it's one of the things in this country is the ages at which you can do things is very contradictory. It's like you can get married at 16 and have children, and you can get a driving license at 17. You can vote at age 18 in the national elections. Apparently you can vote age 16, which I didn't realize until I just looked at it, in local elections. And you can drink age 18. And it's like, well, you're not really that old when you're that age, are you? And sort of being allowed to do some of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Never mind. That's why going to war, drinking, getting married, you'd think that these were all saying either you're an adult or you're not.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we also know biologically we're kind of not really adults until about 24, 25. So things like they won't do LASIK surgery on you until you're at least 24 or 5, I think. You can't rent a car in most places until you're at least 24. because of kind of an age of maturity and what they know from actuarial tables. People who are going to put their money on supporting you at a given age, and yet you can go get married. Okay, what's driving that? I wonder. Hubert,
Given the declining birth rates across the world in most places, yeah, when we look back in the past, I mean, you do get people who married age 12, age 14, sort of a few hundred years ago, don't you? And that was not considered out of the norm, and people died by the age of 30. So
right. And at the end of the day, for a small community out in the middle of nowhere that wants to grow, they want to encourage women to have children as quickly as possible and as many as possible, because that's how the community is going to be able to survive the winter when you lose a lot. Right? Yeah. Gosh. You know, Emma, I love the way you do these thematic slices. You're doing thematic slices of your own family as you find something that's intriguing to study, but really you inspire all of us to go do that with our own stories. Do you have other little categories of things you think you might explore in the future?
yes, I have got lots of different things I'm going to explore, and I was thinking about the next one. On my Cox side of the family, there were some people, and a lot of these people from this family actually ended up going to America. So, but this particular part of it, they lived in a place called Falmouth, which is down in Cornwall, which is a port town, and they built ships down there, and they also looked after the delivery of parcels and the post and things like that. So there's quite a lot of information about them down there. So I was going to put something together and pick out little bits and pieces, because we went and looked around the museum down there, and I found some of my ancestors' names or distant cousins' names as actually showing on some of the displays and things, which is always quite fun to do.
Well, I think that would be a big hit, because I certainly know for what little research that I have done that many of my ancestors who came from England, well, 98% of them did, came from England, and they went through Falmouth. And I had no idea that there would be some resources there. I can tell, because I know what the story is when they got here, that's where they came from. I had no idea that there were resources there about where, the transit and all those kinds of things. Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they've got in terms of the passenger records or anything like that. I'd need to have a little look and see if there was more information there. So I was going to, I know that they built ships, so I was going to have a look at that aspect of it there and just see what else I could find out about the family. And the family intermarried. There was Cox, I think there was Fox, and then there was a third one, and between them there were three of the most powerful families in the town for a few generations, it seemed like. And then the guy who went there originally, I mean, there were mayors and all sorts of people who had run the town basically, and his name was James Blatch Cox. So if you come across anybody Blatch Cox in America, or Blatch, it's likely to be something to do with him.
Wow.
Emma, I did join the family search at Roots Tech.
Oh yes.
But I could only get the Bradley's side up. I got lots of Bradleys, but nobody else came up. Like my mom's side didn't come up or anything.
When we were talking about it previously, we looked at the fan view in family search to see that your family is actually linked into the right people, or that the right people are linked into your family. And that's where, if you're missing a whole branch, you have a look on there and you can see that it might be that someone's got something wrong somewhere, and you just need to go in and correct that. And you might well find a lot of people actually suddenly appear, because that's what happened to me.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yes.
I think 216 or 13 or something came up for the Bradley side, like my dad's side. Yeah.
Yeah.
And back.
Yeah.
Now, how do you start? You don't start with my dad as the first generation, do you?
I basically uploaded my family tree and put it on there, and then sort of made sure that that what I'd put on there was actually contained in the overall tree, so that things linked in properly. So because it all links into one single tree, and everybody can go in and edit it. That's where you have to be a little bit careful, because some people can change things, and some people put things on there which they think are right, which aren't necessarily right. So if you have the source or the proof of doing something, because I put something, someone had put something on there, and I put a note on there saying, I've got a photograph of this, I've got the actual photograph showing this, so I know this is this person, it's not this person. So sort of trying to prove to people why you want to do something, because I've got a line on there, and I'm convinced they're not correct, because it goes back to one thing, and it's like, it says there are 2 wives, and it's like, there may be 2 wives, but everybody I've got from one line is coming in from that wife, and just thinking, I'm not sure that that is the correct one. And there's one where it's like, goes back to Scotland, and all the research has been done saying this person goes back to England, and it's like, there's a nice document that someone put together a while ago saying this has been researched really thoroughly, and he goes back to England, and everyone's got him linking to someone else back in Scotland, and it's like, no. So yes, you have to pick things apart. It might be that it's worthwhile doing all this in preparation for Roots Tech next year, to get things ready, and just to see how far you can go back, what you can put in terms of people. But try and take a few screenshots so that you can.
I took them all.
Good, good. So you got them.
Yeah.
And then you can go and look at people afterwards and see if you want to connect up with them and what you've got and or haven't got.
Well, I'm going to go to the Mormon church, but they do everything on a Thursday, and I said that's the worst day. But anyway, I'll see what I can do. Yeah, I'm going to see. Yep.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing about it. And you never know, you might find another link. Might find a link to one of us.
Well,
That's right.
Barbara was just saying her and Cynthia are related, and
Cynthia and I are, and various other people, and
isn't that something?
It is. Yeah.
Very
So often I think what happens is as Emma was describing, so often what happens is that someone has loaded a tree and you're creating duplicate people. So you may be hooked into the person, and it doesn't, that link doesn't go anywhere else, because everybody else has discovered that there was a copy, and it's the other one that everybody else has linked to. So you have some stub of the tree essentially that is a duplicate of somebody else that's already there. I discovered in my family tree, my great uncle was listed as my great uncle was listed as my great grandfather's son. Well, no, he's the brother, because it was wrong on his death certificate. Well, I know the death certificate was wrong because I have other evidence to it. And, I don't make a lot of those changes because I'm an idiot. But there are, that's the kind of thing that I had to untangle my mother. I knew my mother, and had the rest of the evidence to follow it.
What you're talking about? What you're talking about is, I've found that if they had lots of children, you'd find somebody creates the parent each time, and then it's a matter of actually sort of deduplicating all of those parents, and then all of a sudden you have people all linking up.
Yeah, it's very satisfying when it does.
No, I think I've done that sort of 6, maybe even 10 times on a single person sometimes, just thinking, oh, this is the right person. Okay, there's another one. Deduplicate, and just merge, and then you end up with what looks correct.
Yeah, but certainly in my family, I'm going back on some of those, such as how I'm connected with Cynthia here. And there's some of these that are like, wait a minute, it's already, 16th century. So the data's a little wobbly to start with, but let me see. She was born, she and her husband were both born in England, and then he dies. And in the same year, she delivers a baby in the colonies. Maybe, but really, would she get on a boat?
How likely is it, is the question you need to ask yourself a lot of time.
Yeah, show me the money. I don't know. Anyway, I don't get too worked up about that, because
I think this year I did a load of work, and it'll be interesting to see if I go and look at the tree this time next year, because I don't look at it that often, and to see if it still is how it is now, or whether other people have edited it in some way and I need to go back in, and it's like, okay, change a few bits here and there. So probably.
It's still satisfying to discover those things that somebody else found, I had somebody else on Ancestry discover photos from the same event in 1912. My great-great-grandparents had a 50th wedding anniversary party, and there are photographs from 1912. It's such a great event. And I have one photo. It's the cabinet card, and it's you can tell by all the outfits that they're wearing. And there it was on Ancestry with the entire extended family, the entire set of names listed, and they're wearing the same outfits. I don't have that picture. It's a grainy picture on a PDF. I'm like, dude, hello, cousin, talk to me. Oh, Ansel, test me off. Shouldn't use that language. It's being recorded. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Emma. I always appreciate this exploration and how you take us down your fascinating family and the connections and the careful work that you do to pull up the history and give us all inspiration to dive into our own families, because at the end of the day, 15 generations back, we all did have families. We just don't know where they are or who they are. And to the work that you've already done, you show us that there is something really interesting back there. And the stories are what it's all about, eh?
They are indeed.
Yeah, it was
Thank
very
you so
interesting.
much. Until next month then.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
watch for the comments and watch for the inspiration that bubbles from here.
Thank you.
Thank you.